Hello, this is Christian Idealism, and here I have Johann Ratz and Spartan Theology. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so what we're going to be discussing today is idealism and religious pluralism. Now, just for the sake of my audience, religious pluralism is, as if you look at the word pluralism, it's just basically the idea that there's multiple beliefs, I guess. Whatever, I mean, pluralism can mean anything, regard. But when it comes to religious pluralism, it has to do with the fact that there are different religious beliefs out there, and that there's thousands of religions in the world. And the big question is, well, which one is true? Like, there's all these different dogmatic beliefs that say that theirs is right and everyone else is wrong. And so today we're going to be discussing that and how idealism can fit into that. So let's get started. So What's what do you think is the one thing that all religions can agree on regarding beliefs?
Well, I'd say most religions agree on somewhat of the same moral standard.
Well,
I'd also say,
yeah.
all right, go ahead.
No, we're broadcasting. We're live right now. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd also say they don't all call it the fallen states, but from my understanding of the way, like, when I read like a metaphysical model of how this works, right?
Yeah.
I actually found that the fallen state shows up on, well, one of them really isn't a religion per se, but I could say 6 major religions,
Wait.
including all the 5 big ones. So it's
Okay. So it's Abrahamic
Christianity,
ones.
Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and the New Age. And the fallen state shows up on all 6 of them.
Well,
It shows up in different ways. In some ways, it doesn't actually identify. They don't actually call it the fallen state, or they won't actually identify it with the fallen state. But what they're describing is the same thing.
Well, I mean that kind of. I mean, I think we'd all agree on this, that the point of religion in the first place, like it's not necessarily the belief in the God or the deity, or these certain moral principles. It literally, the purpose of religion, why it even exists in the first place, is basically realizing that there's something wrong with mankind, and that each religion has a different way of solving this problem called the fallen state. So that's on all. I mean, not I wouldn't say all religions, but at least the 99% of them have
all the
principle. Yeah, I guess you could argue that some of them don't, but those are more philosophical anyway, so it's not really. But the really big ones, 99% of religions, or probably you could argue all of them, do have this concept of the fallen state, and so I guess that's one. What they do agree on is there is something wrong with mankind. It's just they disagree on how to solve that problem. And then another thing I think would be universal is the golden rule, which is basically that thou shalt treat their neighbors as themselves. I think that's pretty much universal within all religions. I mean, you can find it in
Yeah,
you can find that in like Greek pagan philosophy and even Roman pagan philosophy that's been dead.
It's a wide range of them.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do, though, is to point out when there's something that helps people see things in this so that they're not usually able to see. Most times when people discuss theology, I mean, when you discuss theology, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
God, well, God and God.
I know that, but what I'm saying is, like, say, specific theological doctrines. What comes to mind?
Well, it depends on what religion it is, but because I know there's natural theology, and then I think it's revealed theology. I'm not sure.
I think.
Because I know natural theology deals with if there is a God, and then revealed theology has to do with which God is it.
But it's not just a matter of which God; it's which doctrines. Because for example, a name is just a name. It doesn't really mean anything in the big scheme, right?
Yeah.
So you could have, sometimes there's you call God some other name in some other, part of the world, right, with different language,
Yeah.
different culture, etc. The point is they all believe in this. There's a great God they believe in, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that it's this God versus that God. It's that there is a single God concept, and they have different names for the same being, right? And so what makes them different is not that they have different names. It's which God versus that God. It's the set of theological doctrines that go along with the God.
Well, I mean, it has to also do with the nature of God. I mean, there's pantheism.
Right,
There's,
I know, but what I'm saying is, I mean, you see a little bit of that. Like Hinduism doesn't have pantheism per se, but it does have strong panentheism.
Yeah.
That being said, you could perhaps argue that they believe in the real God, but then have a metaphysical misunderstanding of some of the details of that God. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would agree that Hinduism, I mean, that is, you could argue idealism in a way. So they would,
Yeah,
that's
it
why,
is very much like, yeah, it's idealistic.
I mean, you saw my post. I said, I think I posted, I'm not sure if this is the correct wording, but I said, Western theology is true, but Eastern theology is false. And then I said, but Western metaphysics is false, but Eastern Eastern metaphysics is true.
Yes.
I would generally agree with that. Now, some, minute tweak details, but other than that, generally correct.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I want to point out, though, is, okay, when you talk about doctrine, right?
Yeah.
Not about, just naturally, like there's a God here that is like, whether there's God or not, etc. But I'm saying, when you talk about doctrine, what is the thing that comes to mind?
The teaching or whatever.
Yeah. And how do you argue for them? How do you, where do you get your concepts of them from?
Well, you have to. I mean, if you're gonna argue, like for example, that heaven, that your specific doctrine of heaven is correct. I mean, then you're gonna have to. I mean, I don't know how you argue for that, but the best you can do is look at near-death experiences or out-of-body experiential studies.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, say, just in religion. Say you're talking for, like, take another person who is religious.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well,
what comes to mind in
like
how you think about it?
They're moral principles, basically, right?
When you talk to another Christian, okay?
Yeah.
What comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you are discussing some specific doctrine?
Well,
in Holy Scripture, I'd say.
There we go. Okay, so we have a book of doctrine, okay? I want to change that up a little bit. Now, that's true, but what I want to spring in is there is a sense in which, I said it's revealed theology?
Yeah, revealed.
Okay, the catch with that is outside of the Bible, right? You really don't have much context there, do you?
Well,
like, it's hard to translate. Like, if you're arguing the Bible, right?
Well, yeah, if you're trying to argue, like, that's what apologetics is.
If you go over to the Quran, well, you go over to the Quran, you go over to the Upanishads, right? And you can argue between and the problem is you can argue, if you're arguing to someone with the Quran, right, from the Bible, they're not going to understand you. I mean, they're not going to, there's not really any basis. Nothing you can say in the Bible is going to convince them of the Bible. And likewise, nothing in the Quran is going to convince you of the Quran, right?
Yeah. I mean, there might be some things. There might be some things in the Quran.
Some things you agree with, right? Yeah. But what I'm saying is, in general, when it comes to these sort of theological things, they're all based on dogma and they're all based on faith, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so because of that, and this is why the whole pluralism thing is here, and that's why the atheists are able to attack this so easily, is from a third-party point of view, they're all indistinguishable. I mean, how do you tell there's person X's holy book versus person Y's holy book? Like, what does it matter, right?
Well, that's the big argument I used. Like, when I was an atheist,
yeah.
I mean, I wasn't hardcore, but I realized that, okay, well, all these religions are just dogmatic, and, there's really no difference. So, I was just like, well, why don't they're all false? Because they can't.
All right.
Yeah. That's
kind of
like. Let me give you an example. Okay, go ahead.
Oh. All right, I was gonna say, kind of going off what you said, like, say like certain arguments for like theism, not specifically Christian theism, but like, a natural theology, an atheist will say they can't like refute it. They'll say, well, say modal ontological argument, therefore Jesus. That's like not the point. That's the point is for theism. I think they kind of get like revealed theology and natural theology confused. Going off what you said.
Okay, but when you're dealing with two or three sets of revealed theology, and the more revealed theology you get, the worse it gets, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no way to tell between them.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that?
Because they're different teachings.
Well, they're obviously different teachings, but why is it you can't tell which one is right and which one is wrong from? Why is it that an atheist can't? I mean, Anthony Citizen brings this up, right? And he's a complete joke when it comes to metaphysics and to some extent physics as well because of his positivism. But he brought the whole.
I think in his most recent video he brought up about religious and how it's
pluralism. Yeah. The thing about that is that is actually validity. Okay, how is he supposed to be able to distinguish? I mean, if he were able to take the idealism thing seriously, right, which he's not for whatever reason, it doesn't make a shred of sense. His epistemology is a joke essentially, and that's why he can't. But he's not able. If you were to give him the Bible, the Quran, and the Upanishads, how could he tell, and the Torah and etc.? How could he distinguish between them?
Well, he would have to look at their teachings and then compare them. That's what comparative religion is basically.
I know, but compare them with what? How would you be able to say this one is right, this one?
Well, that's the whole point. Is the question is what is reality, and if idealism is reality, then there are certain religions that are false, but then others that can fit with, that.
There we go. Now we're starting to think.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to present something of a kind of hypothesis, or not a hypothesis. It's a working way to look at this, right? It's a methodology, shall we say?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys. I brought this up in Max Colby's video once before, right? Interview. And you guys are familiar with the cargo cult, right? The Polynesian cargo cult?
No.
It sounds familiar.
Familiar. And during World War II, they had this, and actually before that, they had people landing in airplanes in these Polynesian islands, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the islanders were, Stone Age, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, they could be, high Stone Age, but it's still Stone Age. And because of that, when they see a guy land in an airplane they haven't seen before, they think this is magic, right?
Yeah.
And the guy's got cargo. These are gifts from the gods. And the airplane lands, and the tall white god steps out, right? With his spirit box, which has an antenna on top and all that, right? And so they then start religions on this stuff. They actually, as sacred. You guys still there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I was just muting my mic.
Okay.
Yeah, I just muted my mic.
I'm just making sure. They make up these religions about it, right? And they even have these rituals where they make airplane strips, or they make they use aluminum foil to make. They wrap boxes up with aluminum foil, and they put these aluminum foil antenna on top, and try and communicate with shamans using these fake radios, try and communicate with their dead ancestors and so on, right? And it's all kind of hilarious. But the point is that in some sense, these cargo cults aren't false. Maybe they have a misunderstanding of the nature of the quote-unquote tall white gods, as well as their sky chariots, etc., and so forth. But the point is that what they're describing is real. There are real Europeans coming out of real airplanes, giving them real quote-unquote spirit boxes and other cargo and so on, right? It's all very real.
I think I get it. So so they basically worship these planes, but they kind of misunderstood.
The people, not the planes. They worship the people coming out of the planes.
But they missed. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think these are magical items of the gods. And then
the
island across, the other island though, the guy landed in a helicopter instead, right? And so then they have their two separate dogma books, and one of them says the tall white gods come from airplanes. The other one says the tall white gods come out of helicopters. And given 500, 1,000 years, they're then having wars over dogma because the heretics in the other island say that the gods came over from the helicopters when the the holy books that they came from airplanes, and so therefore they're clearly heretical and have to die, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And so we have a war going on now, right? And the funny thing, what?
Over two different dogmas, religions, basically.
Yeah, and the funny thing is they're both right.
Well, yeah.
Yep, they call white gods come out of airplanes and they come out of helicopters. Now, the thing about this is, though, is that the truth is recorded in the dogmas, okay? This would be kind of the equivalent to the holy books, the Bible, the Quran, the Upanishads, etc. But the thing is that there's something missing from it, as it were, okay? It's understanding why these things are true, right? Like, for example, if I, for the longest time, people have seen the Trinity as a mystery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's known in the Bible, but we don't know why. It's like how do you explain this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, remember that video I did, Integrated Triad, where I showed how you can have a minimum size semantic system, and the three elements in the system contain each other due to it, the semantic properties of logical systems. And you apply this result to Hoffman's conscious realism with the combination theorem. You can actually get the Trinity out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fascinatingly here, I didn't use any Bible, any dogma to derive that, did I?
No.
I used something out of logic, a very peculiar result from propositional logic, or actually specifically propositional calculus, and conscious realism, right?
Yeah.
And I combined them, and I got this really cool thing just popped out, right? Now the thing is, let's suppose that you took that concept, right? It's a scientific result. We use Hoffman's conscious realism, combined with a certain aspect of propositional logic to get there. But now, let's suppose that you were to tell someone that who did not understand this aspect of propositional logic and had no idea about the physics of conscious realism, right? Say someone thousands of years ago.
Yeah, like when Christianity.
They write it down in a dogma book, right?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be false. That's the important thing to remember. It's because it's dogma doesn't mean it's false. It actually is true. It's not belittling the fact that it's. But the thing about it is there's not understanding of it, and we know there's not understanding of it because for the longest time, people saw the Trinity as this incomprehensible mystery that was beyond the mind of man to understand, right? Just like the airplane of the gods was beyond the mind of the islanders to understand, right? Therefore, it was seen as magic and so on, right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing about this, what's very curious here, though, is that we have a uniquely theological thing that was revealed, right? It's revealed theology,
Sure.
But we just went around the other way and derived it out of metaphysics.
Oh God.
We took metaphysical theology, and essentially we've reverse engineered the alien technology, as it were, that the ancient ancestors were worshiping, right?
Yeah. It's
it's
taking reality, and then fitting it into
the big spaceship comes and lands on the pyramid, just like on Stargate, and all the Stone Age people from 8,000 years ago start worshiping it, and then years later we find the Stargate in Egypt somewhere, right? And we take it over to the Air Force Base there, and we study it, and we figure out how it works. It's no longer magic now, is it, right?
No.
It's all true, but it's not magic anymore. So the cool thing with this is that you can treat theology like this. It has this aura of incomprehensibility and sort of mystery and almost sort of this mystical, magical feel to it, right? It's beyond the mind of man, right?
Yeah.
But now we put it into this metaphysical framework, and we point out that you can naturalize God. God doesn't have to be something that is beyond comprehension either. That's the whole quantum idealism framework in the first place, is that it is a scientific, naturalistic model of God, even if it's not naturalism in the way that, it's not physicalism, and there's stuff that we would call supernatural in it, even though it's,
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on how you define naturalism.
How you define those things, but, how people traditionally define it, it's going to have, it has room for quote things that go bump in the night in, right?
Yeah.
All within a perfectly rationalistic scientific framework, of course. But I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but it's real, right? So the idea here is that you can actually use metaphysics or metaphysical theology, right?
Yeah.
Shall we say we can use the crashed alien ship that we reverse engineered, okay?
Okay.
And we can use the science we learned out of that as a sort of objective tool with which to decide between these various dogma books. Which cargo cult got it right, or got it most right, or got the most important details right?
So it's like, okay, so it's like kind of the method, like, you know how the scientific method is like a method of truth, like figuring out.
Yep.
Okay.
Now we can apply essentially the scientific method to theology.
And see which dogma book is.
And so now it's because beforehand it was all a matter of faith, right? You just start with your dogma and you end with your dogma, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not scientific, but because it's not scientific, and because it's also circular, and it's not just not even scientific, it's not even rationalistic, because it's you start with your dogma book and you end with your dogma book. That's the whole I know the Bible is true because I look up the Bible thing, right?
Yeah, that's the whole circular argument.
Right, but anyone can do that. The Muslim can do that, the Quran, the Hindu can do that with the Upanishads, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And there's no way to tell between them on those grounds.
But once we apply this metaphysical framework,
yes, we have the objective framework, we have the science, that the framework,
well, not just science. I mean, this also goes into philosophy as well.
Yeah, it may merge, the two merge together. Obviously, like you can. Though it was really cool with idealism, with the science of it, the idealism science and the idealism metaphysics are very interchangeable. I mean, there's translate them across.
And that's really the two ways
of scientific concepts, but it's very easy to do that.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, I asked Inspired Philosophy when to join us. Apparently, he was busy, but I was gonna ask him to join because he could have explained the whole historical side, because you can also get it from history as well.
You can, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you have both metaphysics, history, and philosophy to basically get
right.
Yeah, truth.
And obviously there's a lot of stuff that's garbage. Okay, like the Christ myth or stuff that's akin to young Earth creationism of the atheist. That is the young Earth creationism of the atheist, right?
Yeah.
That being said, there is this problem with to someone outside of Christianity, they're probably going to think that and they're used to quote unquote magic being impossible. Therefore, Jesus couldn't have resurrected because that's quote unquote magic, etc.
Well,
right?
like for example, like they always bring up oh, you believe in a talking donkey.
Exactly, or talking snake.
They're like, oh yeah, well, how do you believe that? Like, well, wait a minute. If the universe is a simulation, then a talking donkey.
That's quite possible. Yeah, just program the talking donkey in.
Exactly. Yeah. So kind of blows out the whole argument.
Yep. I'm sure we have kids' games of talking donkeys.
So we have this is how I see religion for the most part. I see these different dogmatic beliefs, but at the same time, I could see these religions as quote unquote models of reality, and each one is trying to basically model what reality is.
They just don't realize they're models because
there's something wrong.
The person who the source that modeled them, it's akin to the whole, it's the cargo cult thing, right? It's the Europeans landing in their airplanes and telling the natives about airplanes and radios. And the cargo cults are not false by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, in some aspects they are, but like the core of them, there are actually quote unquote true, right?
Yeah.
And that's the curious thing about this. But the problem is that their frame of understanding things, they've lost something in it. So because they don't have the right context.
They don't have the right pieces.
There's also a sense in which they're quote unquote false.
Yeah, so there is some. So it's not like it's completely false or completely true. It's just somewhere.
And even in the senses in which it's true, there is another sense in which it's quote unquote false, because it doesn't. What they're holding as a truth statement, even though it is true, they don't have the context to understand really what it is that they're talking about.
And this
And to
is
them,
how,
them, it's in a sense a piece of superstition,
but that I mean,
even though it is also true.
well, I mean, that's how animism started. You know what animism is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you get like these different beliefs, and where there's spirits in this force spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and you get Greek gods and all those mythological beings. Now
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that they're false. It's just they don't have the full picture. I mean,
Yeah. And so now the cool thing with this whole idealistic framework, we can have a very elaborate physics, of this, metaphysics and physics. And not just, now we got to this cool thing with the whole quantum cognition, space-time emerges from Hilbert space mathematically. And people try and say Hilbert space is just a mathematical tool. And in a sense it is, but there's obviously something real that it's describing that you can also call Hilbert space. And that has to be real, otherwise space-time doesn't really emerge, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, the wave
And then
function been
yeah.
shown to be real in a sense.
Yep, and then you can combine that with quantum cognition, right? And there are reasons to take quantum cognition literally rather than just a model. And when you combine the two, you can actually develop a scientific model of what's going on behind the physical universe, aka the supernatural.
Yeah.
Or what we call the supernatural.
Well, I mean, supernatural. I mean, when people think of the supernatural, they think magic, like automatically.
Yeah, it's not magic.
It's not magic.
It's supernatural in the sense of everything everyone thought was magic, right? The airplanes and the spirit boxes and the TV sets with the the people's ghosts looking through the screens, etc. The magic crystal balls.
Like I'm sure if I would have went back in time and brought my iPhone and showed people back then, like, oh, look at this, I can, calculate and do all this weird stuff with my phone, they would think it's magic.
Exactly. So in a sense, we're just saying that miracles, the concept of the Trinity, demons and angels, afterlife, all this stuff is very much akin to airplanes and spirit boxes or radios.
Yeah, it's just more.
It's not magic at all. It's just it was magic from a certain point of view, and you had people who didn't understand the metaphysics of it. But we can have a very precise model of this now. You can derive the Trinity out of Hoffman's conscious realism in a mathematically precise way, which is quite shocking if you think about it.
You think of what like magicians do, they call it magic because how did he do that?
Yeah, exactly.
And once you show them how you did that magic trick, and you're like, okay, this is magic.
I see how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Then you start to understand. Yeah, so it's not. I mean, it depends on how one defines magic, but
yeah.
It's not,
so
it's not magic in the sense that it's unknowable or something like that.
And so then what you can do is you can go back and look at all these different theologies, right, from different religions, and you can investigate them in terms of this metaphysical context. And then from that, you can then, when they start to conflict, either when they say different things that are like just not overlapping.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes they are overlapping and you don't see it because you don't have the metaphysics in it, right? And that's the cool thing. When you look at that, it's like all the Christmas lights turn on. It becomes very apparent that what they were based on was something very real. Because it's not a coincidence that they all just happen to come out of the same framework all at the same time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So,
but it's a framework that wasn't understood by the people who received by the Polynesian islanders who understood the dogma, right?
Yeah.
But when you get the actual science of how the airplane works, you go over to all these different islands and you suddenly discover, lo and behold, they're all fitting into this one uniform pattern across. What are the odds that if it was all just made up stuff, it wouldn't happen like that,
Well, no. I mean,
but then secondly, obviously, sometimes religions, are exclusive, right? Islam is exclusive, Christianity is exclusive, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if all of them are like that, but those two are at least. And so when you have religions that are exclusive, you can also examine those claims, and you can look at them in the framework of, the metaphysical model, and you can use the metaphysical model as a kind of judge to see kind of scientifically which one is the right one, rather than just circularly Quran thumping or Bible thumping.
It's like an objective.
Exactly.
Just
It's
like
very fascinating because
just like in science, we test hypotheses and we find which one's better.
Mhm.
In this case, we can test dogmatic books or dogmatic beliefs called religion and see which one is valid.
And you know what's really fun about this? Because I've done this kind of as like, I mean, I've done this for years. As you know, it started out as like a small thing because I noticed some of the stuff. But then I saw how much of it could fit in. I'm like, oh, we can have a full, complete model of this. You can actually take these different things from different, religious beliefs and so on.
Yeah.
And you can actually see it's almost akin to archaeology in a way. Because you're digging through all this stuff, but no one thought this isn't, this is all just random garbage superstition these people made up.
I mean, that's kind of like how history, like that's how you can get Christianity through history as well. I mean, you get the whole resurrection argument and stuff like that.
But you can then go and you can look into all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be like, oh, that's not gibberish. That's actually this, and it fits into this picture, this puzzle over here, And you can fit in all these different concepts from these different the helicopter on the one island and the airplane on the other island and the blimp on the third island, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wait a minute, they're not all false. They're all actually true. They're using different applications of the same aerodynamic principles to fly.
Yeah.
And we can see this, and all of a sudden it all makes sense, and it's kind of cool because it's like you're taking up these pieces, right, that have been kind of lost, right? Because it's some of this stuff isn't even extant anymore.
Yeah.
And you can put it into this framework, and you're like, oh, look what we discovered here. It's you're basically unearthing this big jigsaw puzzle.
Well, it is the biggest jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it's not just the major religions; the minor religions have some of the pieces too.
And philosophy as well. I mean,
and philosophy. Well, philosophy combined with, remember, idealist metaphysics, which is philosophy, and idealist physics are
but what I don't mean by I mean like the different philosophical positions. Like if you go.
Oh yeah, you're right. Like hylomorphism, for example, comes out of idealism.
Yeah.
Now, one example of this, it was very relevant to this, deciding which religion is correct, is
just a quick question before is this how you basically came to Christianity? Is through this idealist framework? Or
no, I was always Christian. I discovered this after the fact.
Okay.
I mean, it's been strong enough that it's been able to convince people who have been previously atheists.
Okay, makes sense.
Now,
okay, go on.
One of the fascinating things I discovered is the fallen state. Remember I said at the beginning how I could derive the fallen state on 6 different religious systems at once?
Yeah.
From the same model? Like, different things coming out of the same model, right? All right, let's start with the beginning. So, on conscious realism, you have 2 interacting conscious agents that see each other's interactions, the information being given to each other as empirical data coming at them, right? Perception and so on. However, that system of 2 conscious agents interacting also satisfies the definition of a conscious agent according to his combination theorem, right? And therefore, what is seen as extrospection in terms of like empirical data is actually also introspection as seen from the higher mind that is the combination of the subset of the other 2, right?
Yeah.
Of course, you can have like a nesting Russian doll system like this, of minds upon mind containing and so on, right?
Yeah.
Like this combination theorem, which kind of fits Neoplatonism in a cool way. Anyway, so now the knowledge of something, as in the introspective knowledge of something at one level, equals the empirical sensation of that same thing at the next level down, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we could derive a model of evil, okay? I derived how privatio boni works is there has to be at the top frame, it's all universally intersubjective.
Well, yeah, I mean, isn't that your whole model?
That's God's frame,
yeah.
And so because of that, there is a single definition of good that is applicable to everyone, and it's, in a sense, everyone's, moral system as well. It's just that, in some people's cases, theirs gets distorted, right? So that it's wrong. It's just the pieces are out of whack, right?
Now, how do you know that this first piece would be the good rather than something else?
Well, because it's good according to everyone's, if they're able to see
Okay.
it clearly.
Well,
It's
okay.
good necessarily according to everyone's frame, because
Well-
everyone's frame is contained in it.
I think this has to do with, okay, so you say it's good. So basically the idea is that I can't, subjectively speaking, you cannot imagine evil, someone doing something evil just to be evil. Because if you do something evil, like let's say
Yeah.
if I killed someone, well, there's a
We'll
reason
get to
why
the
I'm
origin
doing
of
that.
evil in a minute, okay?
Yeah, okay.
That's
Okay.
important, but it's kind of a paradox. We'll leave the paradox unresolved for now. We're just going to start with, we're gonna get to that in a minute, but to do that we have to first derive this just kind of in a naive fashion, right?
Yeah.
So imagine there's Nietzsche's will to power, right? Everyone has their subjective values. There's no objective morality, and everyone's just all morality is a euphemism for it's a mask. It's a nice, pretty mask you put on the word will to power. Okay. And in this world, Adolf Hitler is no better or no worse than Mother Teresa, because in the end, it's all just nihilism and it's all will to power, etc. Value set, right? But now here's the thing: from say Mother Teresa's frame or Hitler's frame or whatever, say someone else agrees with them, right?
Yeah.
There is this subjective framework that those two people share, okay?
Okay.
From which they can call each other good or bad. Now, people outside that framework it doesn't apply to, right? Because if we're operating in this sort of Nietzschean nihilistic framework, there's no way to tell who's right and who's wrong, right?
Yeah.
But from within this context of the two people who happen to share those values, you can call them, good and bad within that context, because that's the values they hold, right?
Yeah.
But now here's the thing. Remember the combination theorem? How you combine the two agents and they become one agent and so on?
Yeah.
And you can keep going upwards like this. Conscious agents upon conscious agents, nesting Russian dolls all the way up.
Yeah.
Well, in the top conscious agent has to contain all the other conscious agents and their subjective value sets.
Okay.
So it's very strange is that even if we go from this completely nihilistic will to power framework, at the very top level, the top conscious agent you have there is somehow going to be compatible with everyone's will to power.
Oh my god.
You see how that works? Isn't that bizarre? Even though they appear to conflict down below.
So even if there was this nihilistic, but wouldn't that kind of be, non-cognitivism, or would that be?
No, because it would actually be a moral value set that's held by this top conscious agent.
Okay, so it is cognitive.
And curiously, it will necessarily contain the value systems of all of the subsidiary conscious agents.
Okay, so even if we were to accept the, power nihilism,
it would do it in such a way that they are all curiously compatible with one another. Which seems paradoxical. We'll get back to that, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Isn't that bizarre?
So even if we were to accept, this power nihilism, like they, like James has argued, ultimately under theism, under this conscious realism, it would ultimately just be, it would kind of evolve into
objective morality, exactly.
Yeah, objective morality. Yeah.
This is very bizarre. So now here's how the evil appears. Okay, so firstly, this can be called objectively good from all reference terms. Not objective in the ontological sense, but in the epistemic sense, right?
Yeah.
It still is subjective, just subjective to this universal agent, right? But it's objective in the sense that everyone can start with their value systems and arrive at the same conclusion, right?
Yeah.
That's what objectivity means in epistemology. So it's objective in that sense, that's good enough. Anyway, so it's objectively good, right?
Yeah.
And all of its actions are therefore motivated by its values, therefore those are all objectively good as well, which means all of its creation is also good, necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Like it has to create, and everything it creates will be objectively good because of how it is, motivated to create.
Okay.
And so now the only way that you can have evil in this system then is if that objective creation, if everything that exists is good, then evil has to be an absence. It can't be a thing in itself. It has to be an absence.
So,
see how that works?
Well, I understand. I can agree with that. Like I said, I think I was going to explain it how even subjectively you can't think of someone being bad just be bad, because if you're gonna
Right. Okay. So we have essentially privatio boni appearing there, right?
yeah
Evil
you
can't
get
exist on its own; it has to exist with good. So now let's
and,
go back to that other result, okay?
okay
With the conscious realism, how introspection on one level, aka knowledge of something, on one level equals the empirical sensation of that thing on the next level. Okay, so you've got blue and red. Let's just take the blue in your icon, right? Your screen icon.
wait which oh yeah, at the bottom. Yeah, I see blue.
Yeah. Okay, now if the conscious system, say you were colorblind, okay? You never saw blue in your life, and you had a lucid dream the next night, right? You would never be able to dream of blue either because you never introspected it. It wouldn't exist as an introspective component, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, at the level down, when that conscious agent is broken apart into smaller conscious agents who are experiencing the introspection as empirical extrospection, they would never experience blue either, right?
Well, no, because they would never. Yeah.
But then, say you were, cured of being colorblind the next day, right? You saw the color blue. You then had the knowledge of blue in your mind. Okay.
Yeah.
When you went to sleep, you would suddenly
blue.
see blue. The knowledge of blue would translate into blue. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So now using that framework, and so you could say the knowledge of strawberry flavor equals strawberry flavor inside the dream because you're translating from level the combined conscious agent to the system of conscious agents who are treating the first conscious agent's introspection as empirical extrospection, right?
Yeah.
So now here's the curious thing, right? Apply that same principle to the existence of evil. So if we experience evil in this world, it must mean that the conscious agent above us that's simulating knows the knowledge of evil, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he wouldn't be evil. He would just.
No. And you think about when I say conscious agent above us, I don't mean necessarily God, because it's this.
Oh,
okay. You can have a whole hierarchy, see?
Yeah, but
I mean, at some level it's God, but like it's you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's within this framework, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever conscious agents are, entangling to simulate the physical reality we see around us. So, but now remember I said that evil can't exist without good, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, if it knows evil, it also has to know good, right?
Well, duh.
Okay, so therefore, if we have evil in our world, that means that at the simulating in Hilbert space, whatever, there has to be the knowledge of good and evil producing the evil in our world, right?
Okay. Well, I mean, what's now? Yeah, it gets back to what's causes evil.
That's the Christian. That's the whole knowledge of good and evil in Genesis.
Okay.
It just generates that. And so now the cool thing with this is, yeah, you have the fallen state. Now we're going to jump in next. Okay, now let's go to this is within the Abrahamic religions, and it is Judaism, which has connection to Christianity. But this is a weird branch of Judaism, which is
esoteric.
kind of it's esoteric, and it's kind of it's additional to. They have an additional idea as well as the whole knowledge, good and evil thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And they see this in Kabbalah, right? And they have this notion of first of all, I'm going to point something else out here. It's fascinating. They have this notion that we have this emanating realm that is producing our realm, okay? And what we're seeing is what's behind there is a veiled reality. We're seeing perceptions. Behind those perceptions, there's something else, but it's veiled from us, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's fascinating is when you go to modern physics, you see Bernard Despaigne, right? You got the Templeton Prize.
Yeah.
The other day there, and he was talking about quantum mechanics, and what he described it as is that the world we see is not the actual real world. There is, and he used the word veiled reality to describe the world behind.
Well, isn't that the whole holographic principle? Basically?
Well, it's not just that, but it's the whole emergent space-time principle in general.
Okay.
I mean, it's that, but it's also like the whole notion that we see these these entanglement features, right? Like, there's no reason these two particles miles away should be having any relation with each other whatsoever, right? Yet they do, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing about it is well, that's because the level at which they relate is not the level that you are able to see or interact with. It's not the space-time, energy, matter universe. The space-time, energy, and they actually will bring in the space-time, energy universe is an illusion, right? Which that's idealism for you.
Yeah.
The physics and so on. And so what they say is that in this emanating world behind us, right, they had this thing called where God was projecting stuff from his goodness, right, this light from his goodness. And there are these vessels that held this, right, and they shattered. There was a catastrophe, and they shattered. This was called the shattering of the vessels. And now, because of these shattered vessels, that is producing distorted emanations down here that we see as evil, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to point something about privatio boni. Go back to privatio boni for a second. Now that seems like not incompatible necessarily, but just plain separate, right? It's like where did that come from? It has nothing to do with the knowledge of good and evil, etc. Like what is that, right? But now let's go back to Christianity for a second, right? Or privatio boni for a second, which is where we got the knowledge of good and evil model thing, right? Which is the Christian model, right? And what we see here is, well, when you have privatio boni, stuff just can't go missing, right? I mean, God didn't create Swiss cheese. Otherwise, Swiss cheese wouldn't have been, if God created Swiss cheese, you'd be creating evil at the beginning. That wouldn't be very good, would it?
No.
A universe with holes in it, right? Well, so the thing is, the pieces have to. So where is if it's not stuff disappearing, to make evil? The only other place it can come from is through distortion, relative privation. So the fractured pieces there are, in essence, the fractured pieces are, it's you have a good creation and you break it, and now the piece, they say the carburetor is on the other side of the garage and the engine is in the backyard, right? And now the car is quote unquote evil because it has missing parts in it, right? You have to take the carburetor back, you take the engine back and put them back in the car, then it's good again, right? And furthermore, this knowledge of good and evil where all this stuff is fractured, right? That's what is generating all this. These fractures are existing in the simulating realm, right? I said that's where the conscious agent is introspecting, and then his introspection is manifesting as this is generating this simulation of good and evil down in the virtual reality it's contained within. Well, there's your shattering of the vessels with Kabbalah, right?
Well, wasn't Kabbalah? Wasn't that the?
That's the Jewish model. That's the Jewish model, right?
Is that God, or would that be the?
Well, that's the supernatural realm, not God.
Oh, okay.
The supernatural realm.
That's
that's the thing God's emanating or creating, etc. And it's in that sharing our space, and it's all fractured. And now we have this, these fractured. They call them kelopot, right?
Yeah. That would be the Platonic realm in Platonism.
Yeah, but it's fractured there, and so now that's producing privatio boni down here, which then translates to the knowledge of good and evil. And you have evil within the virtual reality, right?
So, what is this Kabbalah? Is that like the ultimate?
It's like the Jewish thing. So now we have two different religions with different concepts of the fall. Now, Judaism also has the Christian notion of the fallen state, but it has this additional notion that it's just kind of out of nowhere, right? At first,
yeah.
So we have two religions that have the same. They look like they have different concepts of the fallen state, but when you look at them closely with this metaphysical framework, they're actually two sides of the same coin, right? Which then explains why Jesus wants, Christianity stresses forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to forgive the fractured, the other element was fractured, and so it hurt you real bad, so you forgive it.
Yeah.
And that repairs the damage that was there.
Now, what do you mean by fractured? Do you mean it's unfixable from within itself?
From the what?
When you say it's fractured, what do you mean by that? Does that mean like it can't fix itself?
Yeah, we'll get to that later, but for now we're just going to deal with the fact that it's broken, but broken in a way where there's like pieces missing, or pieces that are, apart, shall we say?
Okay.
it has relative privation because the pieces that are needed to make it good are not where they need to be. They're somewhere else.
All right.
All right. So now let's move on to the next religion. Now, Islam, it has a lot, pretty much the same notion of the fallen state in Christianity and Judaism because it's an Abrahamic religion. But there was one thing I remember, and this is kind of interesting. This was from I saw this online. It was a video on Islamic notion of the fall online, and I had to dig up the source of this exactly. But talking about how when mankind fell, Iblis or Satan was there, and Satan was saying how he was going to cause God's creation to he was going to shift focus from the spiritual realm, right, which is that's inner, and it was going to be focused on materiality.
Okay.
And now that can be materialism, as in materialistic. I'm saying it can be materialism in the sense of materialistic values, hedonism, etc. But it can also mean materialism in the sense of just valuing things out in the world.
Okay.
Or rather, not valuing things out in the world, but focusing, having your whole, people's ethics follows in some sense from their epistemology, right?
Yeah.
So if they value, and actually shown this in a study where if people value the material realm, or rather they believe the world is material, they will become more materialistic as well.
Well, duh.
In the second sense of the word, more
now when they did that survey,
hedonistic, etc.
What do they mean by materialistic? Do they mean believing in that philosophical materialism?
Yes, if they believe in philosophical materialism, they would also be more likely to be
not just substance dualism, but literally just materialism.
Just materialism. Well, I think dualists may match closely in some respects.
Yeah, but at least dualists. I mean,
yeah, they do believe there is a supernatural and so on, and there is a spiritual, right?
Yeah.
So it's very fascinating because there was this shift in focus, right? That Iblis was trying to cause humanity to have, and the shift in focus would get them to shift focus from the spiritual to the material, right? So they'd emphasize the material over the spiritual. And so now you look at the idealism again, right? Well, what's most fundamentally real is the mental in idealism, right?
Yeah.
And the material is seen as an illusion of the mental, right? Therefore, the mental should have priority over the material, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you see it as material, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can be, that's what's fundamental. Then you're gonna say that's the most important thing.
Okay.
And all of your thinking will be rearranged, whether you think the mental is primary or the material is primary.
Okay, so if you think the mental is primary, like we believe,
do you think that your values will be changed somewhat, so you'll value things differently?
Okay.
Because that's what's most important.
Now, what about? I mean, the dualists. I mean, they believe.
They believe both is fundamental, right? But the problem with that is they can be spiritual, focus on that, and realize.
Well, yeah,
but the problem with that is people are kind of, if they believe the world is material.
Well, they think both matter and.
They believe both. They believe both. But the problem with this is that, we don't live in the supernatural realm. I mean, our minds are kind of projected into it, right? In that sense, we do have some connection there.
Well, I mean, I would agree.
The problem is we're kind of immersed in materiality. You walk down the street, the cement is hard.
Well, I'm in my room right now, my bed, and
so because of that, and the thing is, God doesn't show up, angels and demons don't show up often. We don't see miracles often, and so because of that, everyone's kind of that stuff's there, but it's just sort of theology. It's over in this other territory away from quote unquote real life, right?
Yeah.
It's real. We also call it real, but it has a feel of being less real.
Well, I mean, in idealism, it depends on what we mean by real in this context. Because
real in a practical context.
Okay.
In a not doing philosophy, not doing science context, not doing theology context, in a doing everyday life stuff. Getting out of bed, going to the bathroom, eating breakfast, going to work, kind of thing, right?
Practically, it's
in
real.
that sense. you start to prioritize.
I mean, you act the same way when you're in dreams.
Yeah,
when you're not lucid. Like, like if you're dreaming, let's say if I had a dream, but I don't know I'm dreaming, well, I'm gonna act like I'm actually awake in the quote unquote real world.
And you know how some people, often there's that saying, right, or that so-called story about the Christians who go to church on Sunday, the good little Christians, and the rest of the week they live like the devil, essentially, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the focus, and the reason for that is because the material world is pressing. It's oh yeah, that's church, but that's not really, we do that on Sunday. That's a thing we do on Sunday and maybe on Wednesday night. But the time is it doesn't, we got stuff to do. We got to go to work. We got to pay the bills.
We got to live life.
Take Johnny to school.
We got to do.
We want to enjoy ourselves, etc. Watch movies. Nothing wrong with movie watching, but
yeah.
You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this interesting shift in focus, and that shift in focus makes sense on idealism. And so Islam has, pretty much, it has got the Abrahamic framework it's operating from, so it shares that, but it has that additional element there. And you think, well, where did, in some ways that element kind of is seen in Christianity and Judaism, but it's not stressed the same way, right? So it was kind of stressed there. It's like, where did this detail come from, All right, so there's our 3 Abrahamic religions. Now let's go check something else out. Hinduism, Eastern religions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they have
Now I want to mention something here, just for the audience. In Hinduism doesn't really have a founder. It's like just a mixture of different philosophies. So when we go into Eastern stuff, there's like a lot of magic. Well, not magic, but like there's a lot of weird beliefs, but yet they're put into the same category. Yeah, when you get into that, there's
Hinduism is when you go to India. Apparently, Hinduism is not even seen as one.
Yeah,
it's seen as one religion in an umbrella sense, but it's like
if it depends. Like if you go, it depends. Yeah, it depends on what city. Like if you go to a certain town, they might worship a different god.
Yeah, exactly. One worships Ganesha, the other one worships Hanuman or something.
Yeah,
it's sort of like
the third one worships Krishna.
Sort of like with a scribe, he'll write a commentary on the book, and then that commentary becomes right. Yeah, you get what I'm saying.
That being said, they do have some common sets of beliefs. There's the Vedas and the Upanishads, and those are all common.
Well, Krishna's common. I think that's like one of the most popular gods. Yeah.
They believe in reincarnation, karma, notions of Brahman. They have their set of beliefs that are applicable to them as a religion, even though they're very diverse in a sense when you go into the actual religion itself. But now, one thing, they wouldn't call it the fallen state, right? In Abrahamic religions, they call it the fallen state, right? But when you go to, they're not going to call it the fallen state, but what they do have is something that they have a spiritual goal of sorts, right?
Yeah, isn't that?
Yeah, and it's coming back to it's reunifying with God or whatever, right?
Yeah, so they don't go by the.
And they kind of put it in a strong panentheist framework rather than a weak panentheist one, but it's still in a very basic sense, it's the same goul. Even if the metaphysics is a little bit off.
One thing I want to know about strong okay, I can't say
strong panentheism.
Okay, strong sorry, is that I think it's true that in strong panentheism, God is not necessarily an all-powerful, all-knowing being, because I mean
different depends on there are different types of strong panentheism.
Because
there's something called process theology, which is wrong.
Yeah.
But the reason they come into that is they simply have a wrong model of time. You could have a all-knowing, perfect being on strong panentheism. It's just that.
No, but what I'm trying to get at is if God and the world are correlated, like in strong panentheism, then God wouldn't be an all-powerful, all-knowing being, because obviously the world itself is not. I mean, I guess
at those levels,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, in that sense, because you have to separate the fact that
Yeah, I mean, there's no distinction. There's no distinction like in panentheism. So, yeah, I think under that.
But the point is, Yeah. The point is, though, is they have this notion of being separated from God, right?
Yeah.
And they call that something duality. And the whole point is to escape duality. Okay.
Okay.
And when they do escape duality, they have something very interesting that they call this Maya, or the veil of illusion. And when they get past Maya, or when they get out of duality, unify with God, they are then no longer in Maya, and they can see through, and they suddenly realize the world's an illusion. It's like on the Matrix, right? You know, at the end there,
Yeah.
he always look at the one time he looks at them, and they're flesh and blood human beings. After that, he looks at it, and all there's the green Matrix code everywhere.
Yeah.
And he sees the veil, and none of it's real.
Well, yeah, in the movie.
Well, first, we do know the world is an illusion. You know, that's
Yeah.
just the quantum non-realism, falsification of Liggett
Yeah, but
inequalities.
unfortunately, we don't see that with our. We see a material world. We don't see
Right.
the ones and
But
zeros.
interestingly, they tie together the duality with the illusion of materiality. So, in other words, people being in this dual state apart from God, also that state also makes the world appear material. If they were connected to God, they would suddenly see that it's an illusion. They'd essentially be in the state of seeing the green matrix code everywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's fascinating about this is, well, when I said you can identify the fallen state with privatio boni, and it has to do. You can't be the Swiss cheese model doesn't work because God doesn't make Swiss cheese, but he does make. He does make things that other people can then break, and then the pieces can be floating around, right? They're disconnected now. They're no longer unified as one. They're disconnected. They're no longer connected to God either, right?
Yeah.
Well, so the thing about this is that in this fallen state, they're disconnected from God, and because of that, they see the world as. Well, here's the thing, right? Number one, that is duality. That is the concept of duality you see over in Hinduism. Not to say all of Hinduism is right, but that concept
It's true. Yeah.
is true, and it also describes, if the point is to get back to God, then in some sense to say that, if that's a desirable thing, then it's undesirable or bad to be in this duality state, right?
Yeah.
So that could be it's a bad thing they're trying to get out of. So they're not going to call it the fallen state because they don't have that concept there, but they do have this notion of duality, which turns out to be the same thing as the fallen state.
It's just
It's
described
the broken pieces, the privatio boni, which translates to knowledge, good and evil, the shattered vessels, and so on. Now, what's interesting is, let's suppose that you were able to unify with, or spiritually connect with the mind simulating the universe to a sufficient degree, okay?
Okay.
You have access to okay, so you see your computer in front of you, right?
I see my icon and your icon, and yeah.
Now, before you were an idealist, you didn't think of the computer as being mental, right? You just thought this a material object, and it was obvious. Everyone knew it was a material object.
It looks material, but I mean, that's, even if I have a dream, everything looks material.
I know, but what I'm saying is before you ran into idealism, thinking the computer was anything but a material object was just the last thing you would think of, right?
Yeah.
And to you, it was just obvious that it was a material object, right?
Yeah.
It's just just common sense. It's our intuitions that are built into our senses, right?
Yeah.
Well, why is that the case? Why do you think of that as material and your mind mental? Think about that for a second.
Because I'm stuck in that duality.
No, but forget any reference to religion, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Where did that concept? Why does it appear material rather than mental?
Well, I mean, that's kind of. I mean,
it doesn't have mental properties, right? You don't see it as an animate object. Number one.
Yeah.
And number two, you don't see it as any connection to anything like thoughts, can you?
Well, no. Yeah. I mean, I could think of a computer, but it's not gonna. My thought of a computer is not gonna look the same.
But the computer itself in front of you, you just don't think of the computer as being in any way related to thoughts.
No, I don't.
It's just, a material object sitting on your desk, right?
Yeah.
Well, but when you go to idealism, you see, well, it's what you see is actually an illusion being generated from wave functions you collapse, right?
Yeah.
And furthermore, you look at conscious realism, and you get the wave function derives from conscious realism, right?
Yeah.
This combination theorem, and they show how interacting conscious agents produce the free particle wave function and all that. That one derivation Hoffman did, and Donald Hoffman for the audience if they don't know. Anyway, so there actually is a layer of thoughts underneath your computer. Anything you're seeing empirically has a layer. It's actually introspection at some level up, right?
Yeah.
And so there's actually there's your computer, and there's actually being simulated by thoughts underneath it.
Well, not what do you mean by underneath it, just for the audience?
Underneath,
like,
in the sense like in the
space
the computer
Outside,
game hard drive analogy,
Yeah.
right? Underneath space time.
Yeah.
And so there is this world underneath space time, and it's being simulated. It's a virtual reality generated in Hilbert space, and what's simulating it are these quantum cognitive processes in the wave function that we can, very precisely model with conscious realism.
Yeah.
As being part of the wave function, and so on. So now, if you were to entangle with those wave functions, right?
Yeah.
Meaning leave a dual state for a non-dual state, right? So their whole goal is to get out of duality to go into non-duality.
Yeah.
You would suddenly be able to perceive the thoughts underneath the computer, wouldn't you?
The
thoughts that are simulating the computer, you'll be able to perceive them directly.
Okay.
And so now here's a peculiar thought, right?
Yeah.
You now have a you would no longer see it as a material object, because you'd have access to the mind and thought processes that are simulating it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And you'd be able to introspect them, right? And so now suddenly the computer would no longer feel material, would it?
No.
Or you actually be able to perceive beneath space-time with your mind and see that it is in fact not material.
Yeah.
And that's what they call, in Hinduism, they call this Maya, or illusion, which is the illusion of materiality.
Okay.
And when you leave the dual state for the non-dual state, the veil of Maya disappears, and you're now able to see the world as the green matrix code rather than the solid material object.
Okay.
So that derives from the same framework. The one I just used, that's completely separate. That's a Brahmanic religion rather than an Abrahamic religion.
Yeah.
But, here we see this fascinating thing, because you use this conscious realism framework to derive all this, right? And for that matter, it's quantum idealism in general.
Yeah.
You don't need conscious realism per se, but you can get all that stuff out of the generic quantum idealism or idealist metaphysics, and you see that the same thing falls out of that as well. That's your fourth cargo cult. And they wrote it down, and this whole Maya and duality thing and veil of illusion thing, it seems to be completely separate from the other ones, right?
Yeah.
If we look at it closely, and we see, lo and behold, it's the same framework they're using. Right?
Yeah.
Now, Buddhism. So we'll go to the next one. They have this thing, they want to escape ego, right? Ego consciousness. They want to get out of ego.
Yeah.
And ego is separation, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, Buddhism, historically, is a lot less atheistic than some people in the West like to make it out to be. Some forms of Buddhism are explicitly theistic. Yes, there are some atheistic forms of Buddhism as well, but there are theistic forms of Buddhism as well.
Yeah.
And so, and it grew out of a theistic tradition. It grew out of Hinduism. And so now their whole goal is to escape ego, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you have ego is consciousness and separation. But what's privatio boni?
Well, evil, that's the absence of good.
And it's not just the absence, because remember we wrote the Swiss cheese model.
Yeah, it's
evil due to separation of parts.
Okay, yeah.
Which are conscious parts.
And you can't get those parts.
Yeah. We'll get back to how to get out of the fall. We're not going to talk about that just yet. We're just going to drive the fall and say it itself, and we'll talk about that afterward, because that then talks about how we can know which religion is quote unquote correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Using this framework. All right. So we then take its consciousness and separation as ego, right?
Yeah.
So that we have, that fits the privation. That is the privation Boni model. It's parts in separation. So it's a relative privation. It's not the Swiss cheese. It's just the parts are there. They're just missing from the local context or somewhere else. They shouldn't. They should be somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And you combine the two of them. You combine the conscious agents, right?
Yeah.
And they're no longer in separation. They're no longer in ego, right?
Yeah.
So we got Buddhist ego consciousness, right? That's their fallen state, right? So we got the 5 major religions, and we have the fallen state coming out of all 5 of them. Now, the last one is New Age. Now, this is even more loose than, Hinduism is, right? That being said, they have some core themes that show up, relatively repeatedly in it. And one of these actually comes from a esoteric belief system called Hermeticism. It doesn't derive from New Age. I mean, you see it in New Age stuff, but it doesn't come from there. They see it. It actually comes out of an older system called Hermeticism.
Yeah.
And remember, you ever hear New Agers talk about vibrations?
I think so. But I haven't looked into that, but yeah, I've heard of it. Can
What
you hear
about
me?
you, Spartan? Yeah, I can hear you. What about you,
Okay.
Spartan? Have you heard New Agers talking about vibrations?
No, I haven't really looked into the New Age.
Okay,
groups,
they
honestly.
have like high. You see, it's kind of annoying at times when they're talking about got to get your vibrations harder, and it sounds like woo woo nonsense, right?
Yeah, they really are appealing to the quantum woo.
That being said, remember how I said it, because remember the whole classic cargo cult thing, right? The cargo cult doesn't understand how the airplane works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it is woo woo in a sense because they don't understand how it works.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is when you look at the wave function, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they think that lower vibration. Okay, firstly, they're talking about vibrations, but then how it's related to consciousness. But the thing is that lower, according to them, firstly, consciousness has a vibration according to them. But secondly, and that, by the way, because that comes out of Hermeticism, not New Agers adopted it, but it's kind of older than that. But the thing is, lower vibration consciousness is farther away from God, and higher vibration consciousness is closer to God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you get close enough to God, you're out of the fallen state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now that's kind of an interesting thing, right? Okay, so let me point something out to you. Remember I said that there's the wave function and you can combine the conscious agents, right?
Yeah.
And they produce a new wave function, which is itself another conscious agent, and so on. You keep going up this hierarchy. And then way at the top, there is this universal wave function, which is, that's kind of like the one wave function that contains all the others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's outside time, so it's a bit different than other ones. It's the one that's not created, whereas the other ones are in time and so on. And so when you go up this wave function scale, the wave functions will change, right? There'll be more energy in each one of them, right? Because the wave function is defined when you look at the Schrodinger equation. There's the Hamiltonian, which is the kinetic potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that the energy value defines the wave function.
Mm-hmm.
And the properties of the, sometimes they have things like simple harmonic oscillators and so on, where they create different wave functions. Those are put in for the energy values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they will produce different wave functions and so on. All right, so you have wave functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have higher energy when you have more wave functions. We get to the wave function of the universe. I mean, that's a zero energy, but that's kind of special. But so you never actually get to that, right? It's zero energy there, but the thing is, as you raise up in that, right? And the reason is because it all cancels out, right? But the point is, as you raise up in it to get closer to it, right, you're going to have more and more conscious agents, which correspond to more and more energy, right? Would read off as energy in the virtual reality, right?
Yeah.
And so those conscious agents, in turn, will have the combined conscious agents will have more energy, won't they?
Mm-hmm.
Higher Hamiltonian. Now, does anyone here guess how the energy value manifests not in the Schrödinger equation, but in the wave function the Schrödinger equation spits out. Where does it show up in the wave function, the energy value?
Wait, what's the question?
So you take the equation of a wave function, okay?
Okay.
And where is the energy term in that equation?
In the middle, or I mean,
no. Okay. So do you know what a wave function equation would look like? First of all, anyone?
It would. Just.
It's a sine wave, right?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
you mean by that? Okay, I thought you meant like a mathematical equation.
Yes, a mathematical equation of the wave function, right?
Yeah.
The mathematical equation of the wave function. What does that look like as an equation?
Just I don't know.
It's a sine theta k theta, right?
Yeah.
And with a normalizing constant. That's a very basic wave function. You can have more fancy ones with so on, but those are all based out of Fourier series anyway, which produce two more sine waves. Now the k shows up. That's the constant of the frequency. I mean, the thing. That is where the energy value shows up. They put the k is the energy value of the wave function. So what happens when you increase the wave function? Increase the energy in the wave function.
Well, you increase the amount of.
Increase the frequency, right?
Yeah.
Also known as the vibration.
Or
the vibration increases the more energy you get into it, right? Or for that matter, if you go to the conscious realism approach, you say the wave functions are interacting conscious agents. You get closer to the universal wave function, aka God's mind, the vibration increases.
Yeah.
And the consciousness would have an actual vibration here, wouldn't it? Because if it's a wave function, if consciousness is a wave function, and a wave function has a vibration, then you got a...
Well, it produces the wave function, right?
But the thing is, it produces it, but remember on the combination theorem, sets of conscious agents are themselves conscious agents.
Okay, yeah.
So, and then the farther away you get from the universal wave function, the conscious agent, the vibration decreases.
Yeah.
And look, now you just derived the last one. That's the New Age / Hermetic model of the fallen state.
But that's the new that is the fallen state. I mean.
So now here's the thing: we've just derived the fallen state. Now, if you saw all six of those independently, you wouldn't think that any of them had any relation to each other, would you?
No.
In fact, before I told you this, right?
Yeah.
You would have no idea that they had anything to do with each other, did you?
Well, if you're an atheist, and if you're like,
or even a Christian who is not thinking about the metaphysics, just looking at the Bible,
yeah,
right? You would not see that, would you?
No.
And moreover, when someone said this, you'd probably be thumping over the head and saying, "No, it's not duality or focus on materiality over spirituality or fractured, stuff, not shattered vessels and so on. It's the knowledge of good and evil, right?"
Yeah.
And they would, vice versa, would say, "No, it's not that. It's this other thing, right?"
Yeah, it's
and so you'd have
two sides of the same coin.
Let's see. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose we have 6 people arguing, okay?
Okay.
And, okay, would you guys say that a rope, a wall, a tree trunk, a spear, a fan, and a snake have anything in common with each other?
No.
Completely separate, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
They're nothing to do with each other, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. An elephant's trunk, an elephant's tusk, an elephant's ear, an elephant's tail, an elephant's body, and an elephant's leg. A snake, a spear, a fan, a tree trunk, a wall, and a rope. See it?
The relation, or
the trunk is the snake.
Okay.
The spear is the tusk. The blind man and the elephant. It's the blind man and the elephant.
I think I know what you're talking about.
What we're seeing here is a literal case of the blind man and the elephant, and the reason no one could know this is because their understanding of theology was literally the same as the blind man's understanding of the elephant. It was a cargo cult theology. It wasn't wrong. None of those 6 people were wrong. They're sitting there arguing with each other. but none of them are wrong. The
Okay.
elephant is all of those things and more.
No, I don't. For the audience' sake, we're not saying that all religions are true.
But just this one particular doctrine.
Yeah, when just want to get that out there. We're not saying that all religions
Yeah.
are true. Just one particular doctrine.
Yeah. So now we're going to then get into how religions are different.
Okay.
Now, by the way, we can go into other stuff like the marriage model and so on, and that actually shows up on numerous religions as well, and it's the same general metaphysical framework we see over and over. And we can do that with other things as well, such as the spirit-soul distinction in religion and so on. And you could do this with numerous elements in religion, comparative religion. But, you know, we're not going to do that all night, obviously, right?
No.
So let's just look at how to get out of the fallen state.
Let's say that for another talk.
Yeah.
We'll just talk about the fallen state for now.
So we got the fallen state, but then we're going to talk about how to get out of the fallen state, right? Everyone here, all these religions have this notion of a fallen state. They might not call it the fallen state, but they have something equivalent that turns out when we use this conscious realism / quantum idealism model, it turns out to be the exact same thing time after time after time, right?
Yep.
Now, so at Biola, we were taught this thing called spiritual formation, about how they were different. It was different modes.
Salvation.
Different salvation models, right?
Yeah.
There were 3 of them, okay?
Yeah.
And they roughly categorized the 6 different religions we talked about, okay?
Okay.
There was the Christian model, which we'll get to that at the end of this. There was the legalistic model. That one fit. That was about obeying laws. The whole point of salvation was just that you could obey laws really well, type of thing.
Yeah, that's like in Islam and stuff.
Islam and Judaism to some extent, because it's become kind of legal. You know, it was based on the law, right?
Yeah.
Christianity kind of completed it, right? It was about. Yeah. And then lastly is the Eastern approach, which the Eastern approach is a little bit different. They have salvation by works, but their salvation of works is not legalistic as such. They believe in doing good.
It's a different type of legalism.
It's a different type of.
It's not like the classic.
Or a different type of works. It's a different type of.
Yeah.
Works, so we say it's not legalism, but it's a different type of works.
It's like I think what they do is like a bunch of rituals and stuff. But
yeah. Well, their goal is to what they do is they do good things, but that's not for the purposes of saving themselves. They realize that good works don't save it because they realize that they're just external things, right? So they get that part right.
Yeah.
Which is it's kind of an improvement because they realize that the problem is a spiritual one and not just a matter of surface actions you do, right?
Yeah.
But those are to kind of prepare the soul. The surface actions only have value. The good actions only have value to prepare the soul for the second stage, which is the so-called flight of the soul, which is, like say Buddhist monks doing meditation or something, and the purpose of that is they're trying to tweak their consciousness, as it were, manipulate their consciousness to kind of force it up to a higher state.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're essentially bootstrapping themselves with their own ego, right? Their own consciousness, right?
They're still using their ego, yeah.
We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
And so they have that's the second view, is they're trying to use they're trying to do these consciousness techniques to get out of the fallen state, meditation or what have you, or rituals, and they think that these have spiritual powers, mystical powers that can kind of boost them out of the state, right? Okay, so look at those 2 models, and we're going to look at the Christian one last. The Christian one we're going to show. First, we're going to show how these 2 fail and why they fail. Now, the legalistic one fails because it misses the point entirely, right?
Yeah.
It's not about making law that works, right?
Yeah.
Because you can do good stuff, right? But if you're always in pain doing good stuff, right?
Yeah.
If it's always hurting you to hold yourself in. If you're a druggie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you are wanting to get off drugs, but you're just forcing yourself to get off drugs, or you're on smoking cigarettes, etc., right? And you're forcing yourself not to. You're able to do good work by not doing cigarettes or drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you're going through hell with withdrawal, right?
Withdrawal.
And you can hardly say that if you're in hell like that is the unfallen state, can you?
No, you can't.
But you're doing good works, but that's still the fallen state, because it's not fun to do good things, is there?
Yeah, it's not.
It missed the whole, and so it's completely, it's not helping anything, as it were. It's helping surface stuff, right? It's helping, it's making things temporarily good on the surface, but it's not really fixing the problem.
Yeah.
It's not even really focusing on where the problem needs to be fixed either. Now, the Eastern approach is a little bit better because it tries to focus on where the problem is, right?
Yeah.
We got another problem with this, though. Remember that? Do you still have that photo I showed you?
With Donald Trump, yeah.
Donald Trump. Bring that up for the audience. That's hilarious.
I don't know.
Maybe I can try and find it. Let's see here. I'll try and share it.
Hold on. Let me try to find it real quick. I think
It's a hilarious meme because of how accurate it is.
Well, if I share it to, hold on. Let me. Hold on. Can you send it to me? Not through here, but message me it, like the picture itself.
Oh, maybe I can put it up on mine. And let's see if I can share this. The share button is the green one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here we go. Everyone see that?
Yeah.
People love me because I have transcended my ego. I transcend egos better than anyone else. You'll never meet anyone who has transcended their ego better than me.
Yeah.
And everyone knows that's hilarious, right?
Yeah.
But the reason it's hilarious is he's egotistically pontificate, celebrating how wonderful he is, congratulating himself for how wonderful he is because of how much he has transcended his ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very egotistically, of course. So the problem with this is that whenever you try and transcend ego, you can't. The motivation to do so is always within ego.
Yeah.
If you're cut off as a separate conscious agent, and you're trying to transcend that. I mean, the whole notion of raising yourself by your own bootstraps.
Yeah.
You know why that doesn't work in physics?
Wait, what do you mean by like?
So you say in reality, and if you do this in reality, you break your bootstraps because they're not that strong, or usually they're not that strong. But say you untie your boots, okay?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You stood on the ground, you held both bootstraps, and you yanked up really hard, right?
Yeah.
Would you ever be able to get up in the air like that?
No.
Why not?
Well, because you're not jumping. You're just.
Because even though yes, you're pulling up. The problem is that you're pulling up is based on your arms, which are themselves held down by. They're connected to your body, which is itself held down by gravity.
Yeah. Okay.
So all the force you're doing to pull your boots up are in the same reference frame as your bootstraps, or the same reference frame as the body that that is holding you down in the first place.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the thing about this is it's all in the same reference frame, and that reference frame as a whole is gravitated downwards. You could never pull yourself by your bootstraps. Doing all this stuff internal is this internal system. That's your, internal separated system, we can say, to draw the parallel to ego, because ego is consciousness and separation. And so you're trying to pull yourself up, and it doesn't work, does it?
No.
So that's the thing. So you realize what the problem is, but now you're trying this clever trick of let's try and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? It doesn't really work because you're gravitated down by the same means that you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right. So because of that, you essentially levitate by your bootstraps, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really work. But now, so let's look at what gravity is in the case of, or the equivalent of gravity in the case of, and the analog here of spirituality.
Okay, so we're just using it as an analogy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So firstly, what that tells you is that you can't get out of this by yourself. The only way out of this is the Christian one. It's probably the only religion that has this. Is that it doesn't have, it doesn't have you doing it yourself. It's God doing it, right?
Yeah.
Now, to avoid anything Calvinistic with this, you can point out that God is always helping everyone to do this. It's just that in some cases he's doing it. He's omnipresent. He's helping everyone to a degree.
Well, I mean, that would be Molinism. I think Molinism.
Yeah, in some cases he's helping some people more than others when the opportunity is right.
Well, yeah, when the person wants. Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone. Yeah. So they're they're.
Well, I think
the person has to consent to God doing it and all that. But
I think there needs to be a big difference between what's called faith. Faith and then grace. So the faith we do, but then the grace part, which is the actual saving part.
Right. Yeah. And so the point is that God is always giving everyone some level of chance. It's just that in some cases it's more small than others. In some cases it's vanishingly small, and so on.
So basically, what you're saying is that everyone, atheists, Muslims, it doesn't matter what religion you are, God is helping you. It's just
in some cases much more so than others.
Yeah. Okay.
In some cases they're being, or in some cases the help is coming simply as an offer that's just standing there.
Yeah.
For further help, right? The offer. Some of these simply haven't taken the offer at all, and so because of that, they're not receiving any help beyond the offer. If you could say it, then you're getting help beyond the offer, right?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So anyway, so the thing doing this is, let's look at the druggie, right?
Yeah.
He wants to get off drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, at the end, everyone's motivation is towards pleasure and away from pain, right?
Yeah.
Towards what they value and away from what they don't value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's suppose that he's valuing not being naturally he would value not being in pain, right?
Yeah.
And so ultimately, any attempt that he makes to try and get off drugs like that, right? In reality, drugs will stop, right? The withdrawal symptoms will stop after a while, so it's kind of an imperfect analogy. But let's say the withdrawal symptoms wouldn't normally stop, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, he would just go back to drugs. And the reason is he'd see, well, what's the point of this, right? Because you getting off drugs, if the whole point of getting off drugs is to make your life better in the end, right?
Yeah.
And betterness is defined by lack of pain, right?
Yeah.
And pleasure. And he's getting the opposite of that by trying to get off withdrawal, and it never ever changes, right?
Yeah.
What's the point of getting off drugs then? If that's
not only that, but let's say if he was taking drugs that wouldn't kill him, then
that wouldn't kill him.
Yeah. Because I know most drugs would kill people, and that's why they get off of it. But
right, but wouldn't kill you, right?
Yeah.
And so, what's the point of getting off drugs if you can't? If you never ever have the pain never goes away, and it's ultimately not that bad to be. It's not going to kill you to be on it, type of thing.
Yeah.
And it might make you euphoric to be on it, right?
Yeah.
What's the point of being off drugs for all that time?
No, I mean, there is no point.
At some point,
the
entire motivation he had to leave that would dissipate.
Yeah.
Because his definition of pain and pleasure are such that within ego, right?
Yeah.
It's restrained to being on drugs equals pleasure equals good, being off drug equals pain equals bad, right? And it never ever changes. And so because of that, even though he can motivate himself to stop taking drugs for a while, at some point the motivation is going to go, because that motivation is ultimately stemmed in what he defines as good, which turns out to be being on drugs and so on, right?
Yeah.
And so because of that, we have the bootstrap problem, and it ultimately fails. It's the ego trying to escape ego from within itself.
So the legalistic model fails, and then the Eastern model fails.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what's keeping him down, though, is the equivalent of gravity is pain, right?
Yeah.
The pain, eventually, when you come against the ego too strong, eventually the pain becomes so severe that you can't. You can get out of it to a degree. That's why Eastern stuff people do. Eastern stuff is that it works to a degree, but the problem is that the higher up you get, and the closer you get to reaching the final goal, the more increasingly impossible it gets.
Yeah.
Until it becomes completely impossible, because it finally gets to the point of the non-ego state having diametrically opposite values as the ego state, and it will simply collapse.
Not only that, but I should mention this to the audience that there's actually, if you look at like Hinduism, and I'm not saying this to try to criticize Hindus or Buddhists out there, but what I'm trying to get here is that there's no verified or universally accepted, Buddhist or Hindu that has quote unquote achieved salvation or whatever their goal of the religion is.
Yeah. So now I want to point something else out. Okay, it's follow this through, because when I follow this through, you're going to see something really cool how this all fits together. Okay.
Okay.
So pain is the thing that keeps ego in place, right? And if you were to break all the egos, right, and bring them back into the fallen state, you'd have all the pain of all of them, right?
Yeah.
And that would be a lot of pain there, right?
Yeah.
And that would get out of the fallen state, but then no one would be able to hold that pain. They could hold it for a while, but eventually they would collapse because their entire basis for motivation will shift.
Yeah.
See how that works?
Yeah.
And it'll shift back and it'll stop. But now here's something else, though. There is a case, though, where you can take pain for a person.
But
you love your girlfriend or your boyfriend, right?
Yeah.
Or, in this case, hoping no one's gay here or anything like that, but you be a girlfriend in this case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or say your family, your mom or your brother or your sister or your dad, etc. You could take pain for them, right?
Yeah.
Because you love them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, somehow, despite that being painful and quote unquote bad, it's also good because it's helping them, right? And so because of that, you in a sense love that. Not because you love it in itself, but because you love it because you love them and it's for them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And the thing with that is that you can do that to a degree, and that can help to unfracture, say people that love each other, right?
Yeah.
To an extent. But the problem here, though, is that, you couldn't do that with everyone because you're in ego, and ultimately there's going to be some other conscious agents that you are opposed to their value sets, right?
Yeah.
And you'll see them as a problem at some point. And so at some point, you can do that to an extent, right?
Yeah.
You can love the other person you can take pain to a person. Maybe even in some cases, you could take a bullet in the head for someone to an extent, right? Say your girlfriend or whatever. You can take right?
Yeah.
And so you can do that to an extent. And you can even do that, and that can be complete. But you couldn't do that for everyone because you wouldn't love everyone the same way, because the very fact that you're in conscious and separation means that you don't have all the values. You can't value everyone like that because not all the values are located in your own particular consciousness fragment. Some of the values are located in the other person's consciousness fragment, and so on. So you simply can't do that, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore you couldn't take the pain for everyone to thereby pull everyone out of the fractured consciousness state and thereby get out of the fallen state, could you?
So basically, only God.
Only God. No, let's look at this. Exactly. Focus back on this. Yeah, you see, now you just turned the salvation mechanism. Why, the whole, Jesus took the pain of everyone, which includes death and everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how everyone got out of the fallen state. And you only wondered, why couldn't he just pop people out of the fallen state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did it have to be that way rather than any other way, right?
Well, I hear this atheist.
Well, now I'm explaining why this is the way. And most Christians don't have an answer because, well, their understanding of their own religion is cargo cult based, right? It's dogma in a book that was written down. They copied it down. They got their ancient alien. Draw the analogy: the ancient aliens told them, and they don't know what it means and how it works.
Atheists always try to use that argument, like, well, why did Jesus have to die? Like, why couldn't he just forgive?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. It wasn't really about forgiving. I mean, that is also true. It is about forgiving because you have to forgive the person that's opposite you in the fall, Yeah. But what it has to do with is to break the egos, but you can't do it for these other, you have to do it. The other people can't do it. You have to do it for them. Because that is necessary in order to break ego. It requires pain because that's the whole thing. Is consciousness and separation is going to have opposite values as the other, and when there's opposite values, there's pain. Conflict. Some things in pain, whether it's one person or the other person. or both to some extent, they're going to be in pain because their value sets are misaligned and so on. So now here's the thing, right? So because they only have, the value set, everyone has limited value sets. You love your mom, whereas I don't know your mom, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, if I learned that so-and-so that I never knew died, I might feel a little sad, but I wouldn't,
Yeah, you're not gonna. Yeah.
it's an item on the news, right?
Yeah.
But that someone, to the person that values them is a husband or a wife or a mom or a dad.
Yeah.
And that person is, loved a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so let's see here where we're going. Okay, so the point is right. Okay, so in order to get to pull everyone out of the fallen state where it's all completely unfractured, you have to have someone who is able to love everyone in the system, such that he can take the pain on of everyone in the system.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that,
Okay. And now the only frame possible that can do that is the one that contains all the value sets, right? Meaning all the conscious agents.
Yeah.
Which is the universal wave function, aka God.
Yeah.
Universal conscious agent, or Hoffman's conscious realism, where it's all the conscious agents combined into a single conscious. One conscious agent contains all the other ones, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And so the only one that can do it is the universal conscious agent, and that universal conscious agent would therefore, in order to do it, though, you have to be able to break the ego, take the ego, take the pain on of what it would be to break the ego for all of them.
Will be like Neo, like in the Matrix, like take Smith, become Smith, and eventually just destroy.
Exactly. So you take on all the ego of everyone.
Yeah.
And break it all, and you combine all together. It's all unified now in this single conscious agent, right?
Yeah.
And now it's all good because the agent loves to do it because he's doing it out of love for what he's saving, right?
Yeah.
So now you know why it was the way it was. Jesus died and took on the pain of humanity and came back and so on. And then the last step is you simply entangle with that conscious agent, right? If you love the conscious, the only thing left to do is to love the conscious agent that is loving everyone else.
Yeah.
And then he's in the unfallen state, and now by entangling with that conscious agent, aka God, you're now in the state where everything is good in some way. See?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all back out of the fallen state, and then eventually all the other, because God loves everyone, and then if you love someone, you're going to love what that person loves, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you love God, then remember the whole verse: if you say you love God or you hate your brother, you're a liar.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's why, is because God loves all the other people, and so therefore, if you love God, you love all the other people as well, and so therefore, it see how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's it. You just entangle with the universal conscious agent that takes on the pain of all the other ones and reorders it as good due to loving it for the purposes of saving it, and then you're combined, outside of the fallen state, because God is outside of the fallen state, and you're entangled with God through the spiritual connection, and it's through God's help rather than, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah. It's the
And
Christian.
so that's cool, because now I just used that whole metaphysical framework, the conscious real, and it's kind of cool. You have to check up a guy named Christopher McHugh, who he's got this thing called New Apologetics, and he's got this model of salvation based on what I realized when I reverse engineered it, right? And actually he said he got out of some visions, which is kind of interesting. That's all of the story. But what's fascinating is he broke each of the visions down into a principle, and I was then able to break the principles down further into more fundamental principles, which I realized I could unify with my model of the fallen state.
What wasn't that? Oh yeah, you showed me that.
And if I've got it correctly, if I got his model correctly, I've just described essentially what it is here.
Okay.
And so that is why the Christian religion is the correct one, rather than the other. Not that there are other ones are entirely incorrect. It's just that they don't have the thing that counts of the soteriology.
The core, yeah, the core.
They don't have the salvation thing right?
Yeah.
So Christianity has the salvation thing right, and that is the reason why. What I explained here is the reason why. But the thing is they're all stemming. They all have the same. They all describe the fallen state, and they're all describing it correctly from their different angles. It's the spear, it's the snake, it's the tree trunk, etc. No, it's the elephant. The elephant is conscious realism.
Yeah. Now
and it turns out what we've used here is one way to show in which religions are the same using this metaphysical model. We've also shown how to then identify which one is correct using when they contradict each other. How to then also,
now what about
identify when they corroborate and also to identify when they contradict which one is the correct one.
Yeah.
And we can use the metaphysical model in both ways.
Now, what about those that critique? I mean, is conscious realism the only way you can get this, or is there? I mean, is it?
Well, you can do. I mean, in general, like the same framework just comes out of
idealism itself.
Yeah, any idealistic model. Now, there is integrated information theory, quantum integrated information theory, and there are some people. There is apparently some conflict onto whether or not this can apply mathematically in the quantum realm. Some people say that you can only get a phi value above a certain level or at a certain level, and then other people say that they've gotten phi values that are higher than that level. So I'm not certain what deal with that
is. Not only that, but I mean,
but it identifies consciousness with entanglement is the important part, right? Any model that identifies consciousness with entanglement will be able to do this, which means conscious realism. Just regular heuristic quantum cognition, where it's we don't even tie a particular theory of consciousness
just
to it. We simply
basically objective idealism.
Yeah, objective idealism and conscious realism.
Yeah, so that's
treat entanglement and more specific, actually more generally, not even just entanglement, just the wave function itself as conscious.
Okay.
And you can get this.
Well, I mean,
model out of it.
Well, I mean, consciousness would produce the wave function.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Or it's seen as the wave function in space-time, alternatively. So yeah, it's really cool because this whole model, you can just it's basically just objective idealism. You can derive Christian theology out of this. You can derive a lot of theology from all those various religions I also described, but not the particular theology that is relevant to how to leave the fallen state and be saved from it.
And that's the whole point. And like I said in the beginning, that's the whole point.
That's the whole point of religion. So they may get it right in some other things, but they don't. The point though is to get it right on the salvation part. So that's what when we talk about religion being correct, we're talking about on the salvation point.
Yeah.
And there it is on the salvation point of why that one is correct and the other one's. And that's how you do it without referencing dogma.
Okay.
You treat dogma as cargo cult stuff, not false, but it's metaphysically blind. It's the blind men and the elephant.
Yeah.
And then you look at it with this metaphysical framework, and you can say where they're correct and where they're incorrect.
Okay.
And and that's it. And it's cool because with this whole way of looking at this, you can derive all kinds of stuff out of this. You can get heaven and hell out of this. That has to do with, conscious agents in Hilbert space that are either connected or disconnected from God, simulating their own realities in both states. Simulating and disconnection creates hell. Simulating connection is heaven.
Yeah.
There is the gender model, which has to do with these fractured elements having genders, which has to do with at a very fundamental level. It's not gender in the biological sense. It's there's a psychological sense, but it has to do with initiating versus receiving, essentially. of you can see this pattern psychologically even
Let me know when you want to end the broadcast.
Yeah, and so this whole thing is you can do a very thorough analysis of this, and you see this. It's very clear that this stuff is being based on essentially objective idealism.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's basically it. That is what you do. How you derive. How you can use idealism to solve the problem of religious pluralism.
Because I mean, that's what I call it. I mean, that might
Yeah.
be other people might call it differently, but that's typically what most philosophers call it. It's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a problem for all religions, like not just
Yeah.
yeah.
But that is how to
it's like the problem of evil is a problem for theism, but it's applied to religion instead. So, but yeah. So, you want to end it? Or
Yeah.
You want to close? All right. So that's pretty much it. Next time we might talk about other topics, but you got your answer. That's how you solve the problem of religious pluralism.
And specifically, how you identify Christianity as the right one. Then,
yeah,
the method of solving it is simply treat them all as cargo cults, and then use an objective metaphysical framework to judge each of them independently and say which one is the right one. And then the specific case of how we identify Christianity as the right one is the derivation we use here in the broadcast. So,
okay.
Well, that's about it. Let's go off here then.
Yep.